Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Gore, I read your written testimony, and you seem to be saying that you will not answer Congress's questions. Certain questions. Let me read exactly what you said. I will be, quote, I will be unable to make any statements today beyond those in the department's letter or other publicly available information. You claim you cannot answer our questions because the government is being sued. Mr. Gore, the government gets sued all the time. Would you agree? Come on.
Yes,
all the time.
I would agree.
Are you really suggesting that this committee's jurisdiction ceases to exist because you happen to be involved in litigation with another party?
Congressman, what I'm here to say today, thank you for your question, by the way.
Sure.
The department does take very seriously this committee's oversight role, but it's the longstanding policy and practice of the department not to comment on litigation outside of court.
Mr. Gore, the state of New York has sued the government. The state of California has also sued the government. You don't tell California it has to stand down because New York sued it. They are both independent entities, and so are you. So are we. Mr. Gore, Congress is an independent branch of government, an independent branch. We have a job to do. We conduct parallel investigations all the time. We're not asking about your litigation. We're not asking about motions your attorneys might make or about work product they are developing in those court cases. We are investigating the underlying facts. How and why did you and the political appointees at the Justice Department come to ask the Census Bureau to add a new untested citizenship question to the census? That is our job under the Constitution. That's why we want you here. Your job is to answer our questions. So let me ask you this. Please tell us what your specific role was in the entire process. Describe how the decision was made at the department to send this letter with this specific request, and tell us who else at the Department of Justice you communicated with throughout the process.
Congressman, I appreciate the question, and as I said before, the department recognizes and acknowledges this committee's important oversight role. The Department of Justice is an independent part of the independent executive branch of government. We have an independent constitutional obligation to take care that the laws of this country are faithfully executed, that the laws that this Congress enacts are faithfully executed in a fair, even-handed, and robust manner all across the country. As part of fulfilling that mandate, the Department of Justice has a longstanding policy of maintaining confidentiality in its deliberations and its decision-making in order to facilitate robust, open discussion of decisions before they're made, so that people can express their viewpoints, so that decision-makers can make the best possible decisions they can make. That's similar to the process the Congress goes through with members of its staff. You've asked me questions about a decision-making process and internal deliberations at the Department of Justice, and I'm not in a position to answer those questions today.
Mr. Gore, a major decision, I only have a little bit of time. Mr. Gore, a major decision like this one must have gone to the Attorney General. Did you or anyone else speak directly with the Attorney General about this idea? And if so, what was the substance of your discussions with him?
Congressman Cummings, as I've said, the Department of Justice has an important role to play. We have an important independent role to take care that the laws are faithfully executed.
I asked you, did you talk to your boss?
Congressman, I'm not going to discuss any internal communication.
You mean you can't tell me whether you talked
decision-making?
Wait a minute, whoa. You mean you're going to tell me that you didn't talk, you can't answer a question as to whether you talked to your boss, who we pay?
What I'm telling you, Congressman, is that I'm here today to talk about the Department's letter and its public decision and the letter it sent to the Department of Commerce. I'm happy to discuss any public information regarding that. What I'm not in a position to discuss today is anything that may or may not have happened.
Okay, I know you're going to rope it on me. You must have consulted with the head of the voting rights section of Justice. What was the substance of that discussion?
Congressman, again, we facilitate open and robust conversation in the Department of Justice.
Did anyone, you're going to say the same thing, right? Are you going to say, because we don't have time. You're going to say the same thing? Just say yes or no. Can you answer that?
Oh, I'm sorry, what's the question, Congressman?
No, that's all right. Did anyone at the Department of Justice ever raise concerns internally about going forward with your plan?
Congressman,
Same answer? Is that the same answer?
it's the same answer.
Okay. Did you talk to anyone outside of government about this idea? For example, did you talk to Chris Kobar, or if so, what was his substance of those discussions?
Congressman,
did you talk to him about this?
to who?
Chris Kobar.
No.
Okay. Mr. Gore, there's a difference between investigating the facts of an incident and investigating how the Justice Department plans to litigate those facts in court. We're only asking about the first. Will you or will you not answer these questions in full?
Congressman, I stand by my answers.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence. You say you cannot answer our questions because you are worried about inconsistent statements. Is that basically what you're saying?
That's part of the concern, Congressman.
Okay, that's fine. Just tell us the truth. That's all I want is the truth. You have that obligation every time you appear before any judge. You have that obligation right now, right here, and you're not going to answer. Is that right?
I'm answering truthfully, Congressman. This is the Department's longstanding policy and practice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your indulgence.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of my concerns about this whole issue of how we count the census and have a distinction between counting people who reside in an area versus those who are citizens, I think is very important in the context of apportionment. After the census, we're anticipating a number of states are going to lose representatives. Illinois will very likely lose multiple representatives: Michigan, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Rhode Island, Alabama, possibly Minnesota. In the context of what we're trying to do with the census, obviously we've got to count everybody. We need to know how many people live within our borders. But in the context of apportionment, it seems to me it'd be extremely important to know how many of those who reside within our borders are citizens. Can you comment on that?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. I think that is a very important question and a very important issue. It's not one that the Department of Justice has taken a position on. What our letter speaks to is our enforcement activities under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, not the separate question of how congressional seats are apportioned across the country under the Constitution.
But with that in mind, though, I'm just trying to think about this in the context of what we intended with the Constitution and how our government functions. We are a nation of sovereign states who elect representatives to come to Washington to represent them. It doesn't impact how many senators we have, but it definitely impacts the number of members that will represent a state in the House of Representatives. It impacts federal funding for state projects. And I just want to know, I'm not sure that you can answer this, but I think it's important to kind of flesh this out in the context of all this, is that it seems to me to be, at its basis level, unfair for one state or two or three states to have, perhaps declare themselves sanctuary states, which I would think tends to attract people who are not citizens, and then have those people counted and then in apportionment actually have more representatives than a state that has among its population almost all legal residents. Just in a sense of fairness, it would seem that we need to know who are citizens and who aren't.
I think you've raised several important issues in your question, Congressman. I'm generally aware that the Congress has enacted statutes that take citizenship into account for various federal programs. I don't administer those programs, and I don't know the specifics, and the Department hasn't taken a position on any of those programs. We've explained why we think this data is necessary or would be preferable to have through the census at the census block level for our Voting Rights Act enforcement. But I think you've raised several good questions that the Congress should deliberate on and make an appropriate decision on its own.
Well, we take very seriously the voting rights. No one eligible to vote should be denied their right to vote. I don't think we take it seriously enough when people cheat in elections. When people who are not eligible to vote vote, when the dead vote, for instance. You know, there are a lot of jokes about that in certain parts of the country. But I think we also have got to look at it. Again, I'm going to keep pounding on this because I think that this is important. And it in no way diminishes the potential for people who are not here legally or who are not citizens having the opportunity sometime down the road to become citizens and be legitimately counted for apportionment purposes. But I think there's a fundamental problem that we need to address here with particularly with some states that are giving sanctuary to people who are here illegally, in violation of federal law, by the way, and then have those people counted and it have an impact on apportionment. And then you have a number of states losing representation in Congress for various reasons. Alabama is not a state that's losing population. Our population has increased, but we very likely will lose a representative. And I just think, Mr. Chairman, that's a major problem that I think we need to address. Thank you for you being here, Mr. Gore, and for responding to my questions. I yield back.